Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's geography lesson. My name is Nomthandazo Malembe. So in today's lesson, we're going to do the economic sector. So by the way, this is the last chapter in grade 12. Geography. Remember, in term 1, we have done the climatology as well as geomorphology. Then in term 2, we have done the settlement geography. So now in term 3, we are doing the economic geography, which is the last topic. So these are our objectives for this lesson today. By the end of this lesson, learners, you should be able to define what is economic sector. Then secondly, you must know the structure of the economy. And thirdly, you need to be able to identify the economic sectors and also the contribution of economic sector to the South African economy. Then lastly, you need to know the difference between the GNP as well as the GDP, and also to know what does it stand for, the GNP as well as the GDP. So we're going to start with the pre-knowledge baseline. These are the things that we have learned from social science up until you are now in grade 12. So we're looking at the economic geography as a whole. It is a subfield of the human geography, and it is concerned with describing and explaining the varied places and the spaces which economic activities are carried out and also where they are circulated. Then also, you have learned about the sectors that make our South African economy. So in these sectors, we are including the primary sector, the secondary sector, the tertiary sector, as well as your quaternary sector. So these are the 4 sectors that make our South African economy, which means these are the sectors that South Africa uses to generate its income. And then, based on our pre-knowledge baseline, I just have 2 questions for you. So the first one, you need to define what is economic geography for 2 marks. And also the second question, you need to name the types of economic sectors. So I'm going to say per question, I will give you 1 minute. And then after that, we're going to do the corrections, which means with these 2 questions, you're going to have 2 minutes so that you write your answers. And then after, we do the corrections. Right, I hope everyone is done. Looking at our first question, you are supposed to define what is economic geography. So you can say economic geography is a subfield of the human geography, which is concerned with describing as well as explaining the varied places as well as spaces in which the economic activities are carried out and circulate. Then on our second question, you are supposed to answer the 4 economic sectors. We've got the primary sector, the secondary sector, the tertiary sector, as well as your quaternary sector. Then we're moving right along with our lesson. We're going to do the terminology. So these are the terms or these are the concepts or the keys that you're supposed to understand prior to our lesson. So firstly, we have the primary activity. Secondly, it's the secondary activity. And then thirdly, it's the tertiary sector. And then fourth one is the quaternary activity. So these are sometimes called the sectors or they are called the activity. So the primary activity, when we are explaining what is it, it is a collection or the production of natural resources or the raw material. So this is the activities they are dealing with the raw material. We given the examples there of such as a coal, the fish, the wood, as well as the wheat, as well as the rocks or the minerals. So whatever that is raw, we call them the primary activity. Then secondly, we have the secondary activity. So with our secondary activities, it encompasses all industries that manufacture. So what is important, this is the activities or this is the sector or this is the industry that deals with the manufacturing. So they manufacture the final goods from where? From the natural resources. And also it is extracted in the primary sector. So without the primary activity or without the primary sector, it means we cannot have the secondary activity because it gets the goods from the primary sector. Then third one, we have the tertiary sector or the tertiary activities. So these ones, they deal with the provision of services. So all the services are rendered in this sector or in this activity. For the examples, we're looking at the telecommunications, we're looking at the doctors, we're looking at the teachers, we're looking at the restaurants, we're looking at the banking sector. As long as it provides the service, then it falls under the tertiary sector or the tertiary activity. Then we have the fourth one that we call a quaternary activity. So the quaternary activity, it may be seen as advanced service involving the specialized technical skills as well as the knowledge. So this is the sector that deals with the technology or that deals with the specialization. And then we're moving right along, we're getting into the main sectors of the economy that makes our economic sector in South Africa. So these are the sectors that generate the country's income. We're looking at the primary sector, which is the first one. Remember, the primary sector is the one that deals with the raw material. And then after that, it gets to be sent into the secondary sector. So the secondary sector, they are dealing with the manufacturing as well as processing of this raw material from the primary sector. And then after it has been manufactured and after it has been processed into a final product, then now it is ready to be sent into the tertiary sector. So remember, it starts with number one, which is your primary, then number two, which is your secondary, where they process it into a final product. Then number three, it's whereby it is now able or it is now ready to be sold as a service. So we call this a tertiary sector. And then we've got the fourth one, which is the quaternary sector. Remember, this sector, it deals with research as well as the technologies, or it is dealing with the specialization. So don't forget, we've got the four main sectors that make our South African economy. If we may repeat together, we've got number one, it's the primary sector. If we can say, what does the primary sector deals with? They are dealing with the excretion of raw material. And then secondly, we've got the secondary sector. The secondary sector, they are dealing with the manufacturing as well as processing of the raw material, which means the primary sector, they get to feed the secondary sector so that the industries will be able to be stimulated because of the availability of raw material from the primary sector. And then from there, it gets to be sent as a service. Where is it going now? It is going to our third sector, which is the tertiary sector. And then we've got the quaternary that deals with technology as well as the research. This is a specialized service. So I hope it is clear and we are able to differentiate the four because it must be clear from the primary up until you reach the quaternary. So moving right along, now we're gonna do each sector. So number one, we said we've got the primary sector. So you must be able to know the examples of the primary sector and you must be able to define what is primary sector. So if we can go to the definition, the short one, when we're talking about the primary sector, we are talking about the excretion. So excretion, we are taking out these raw material. So where are we taking them out? From the soil. So, and also an exploitation of these raw material. And then amongst the primary sector activities, we are talking about farming. We are talking about mining. And number 3, we are talking about forestry. And number 4, we are talking about fishing, which means the primary sector or the primary activity, it has 4 examples. So you will remember from the farming, you will get your raw material. Let's say for farming, we take maize. From maize, there are final products like your mealie, your cornflakes. It is coming from maize. So remember, maize, it is a raw material, hence it belongs to the primary sector. Then from there, we are dealing with the mining. There are types of mining. We're talking about coal mining. We're talking about gold or platinum. Remember, these are the ones that create these minerals or these resources or these raw material from the soil. Then also, we're talking about the forestry. From the forestry, you do know we get the wood. And from the wood, it's either we make a furniture or we process it into a paper. And then lastly, we've got the fishing. So from the fishing, which is from the river or from the sea, as raw as it is, it gets to be sent to the secondary sector where now they're going to do the canning food. So these are the primary sectors. If we may repeat the definition, we are saying it's the excretion and exploitation of raw materials. And then again, if you may repeat, what are the examples of the primary sector? We're talking about farming, we're talking about mining, we're talking about forestry, as well as fishing. So those are the examples. Then we're moving right along to our second sector. Our second sector, we're talking about the secondary sector. So secondary sector, again, we need to know to define what is a secondary sector, and we must know the examples of this secondary sector we are talking about. So here, if we may define the secondary sector, we are talking about the processing as well as manufacturing. So if you may take note of the wording that I've used color, these are the most important ones. So it's the processing as well as manufacturing of what? Of the primary materials. Remember, when we're talking about primary materials, we are talking about the raw material into the product. So now you are aware the primary activities, those 4 examples. So if we're looking at the example of the secondary sector, we are talking about the food processing, we are talking about the car manufacturing, we are talking about the oil refining, as well as the textile. So all these, they are coming from the raw material in the primary sector, which means the engine here is to get the primary sector to be able to feed the secondary sector with the raw material so that these industries can be able to manufacture and process so that we can have the final product. And then the third sector, we are talking about the tertiary sector. So when we are talking about the tertiary sector, remember it starts from the primary, where they are dealing with the raw materials. Then from there, it goes to the secondary sector. Secondary sector, they are now processing and manufacturing this raw material. And then after number 3, it gets to be sent to the tertiary sector. So to define what is tertiary sector, we are talking about providing goods and services to who? To the consumers. And also, the tertiary sector, it has the alternative name. We call it an industry, a service. And also, you must know the examples. Remember, we said this sector, it deals with the services, so the provision of services. Anything that provides a service, as long as it is in the market. The transport, it's a service. The banking, it's the service. The health services, as well as the education. Right now, you are learning. I am providing a service to you. And also, it includes the trade, as well as the tourism. So these are all the examples of the tertiary sector. So provide the goods, not only the goods, also the service to the consumer, and it is called a service industry. Why service industry? Because all the services are provided in this sector. And then example, you must know, as long as it provides a service. You going to the doctor, you will get a service. You going to the restaurant, you will get a service. You will going to the movies, you will get a service. So as long as it provides a service, it belongs to a tertiary sector. So moving right along, we are now on the fourth sector. The fourth sector, remember, we call it a quaternary sector. This is a sector that uses a high level of expertise as well as the technology. Remember, we said this sector, it deals with the research as well as the technology. Hence, you see in the picture there is a lady who is busy researching in the computer. So this is the quaternary sector. You might say it's like a private sector because it is dealing with a high expertise only. And also, it is commonly mostly in the MEDC. You will remember in grade 9, what does the MEDC stand for? Remember, it's a more economic developed countries. So we are talking about the countries with more resources or the countries who are rich. So the examples of the quaternary sector, we're talking about research as well as technology. So with these four sectors alone, in the exam, you can have from 7 marks, from 8 marks, or where you get to answer the medium or the long questions just based on the sector. So remember, we've got the 4 sectors, which is your primary, your secondary, your activity, and your quaternary sector. Again, I said you must be able to define each and every sector, and you must be able to give the examples of each and every sector. Right? Now we are looking at the difference between the GDP and the GNP. So before we're looking at the difference, we need to know, what does GDP or GNP stands for? You can get such a question for 1 mark in the exam. So here we are talking about the gross domestic product when we're talking about the GDP. Then when we're talking about the GNP, we are talking about the gross national product. So now let's get the difference between the two. So you can see the difference is only in the middle. There is a domestic and there is a national. So looking at the gross domestic product, we're talking about the value of the finished domestic goods as well as services, which is produced within a nation's borders. On the other hand, so when we're talking about the gross national product, we are talking about is the value of all the finished goods as well as the services that are produced by a country's citizens, both in the domestically as well as abroad. So now we need to understand, when you're talking about domestically or domestic, what are we talking about? So we are talking about locally. So when we are talking about the GDP, we are looking at the businesses that are happening within South Africa. And also, when we're talking about the GNP, we are talking about the businesses as well as the profit that is made by the South African citizen who owns the business. It's either he or she owns that business within South Africa or abroad or overseas. So that's what we're talking about. So each and every profit in the business, it gets to be calculated. So within the borders, which is domestic, we say it's the GDP. We are looking at the goods as well as the services that are produced. It is calculated within a year. So each and every year, we calculate, does the GDP increase or it decreases? And also, when we're talking about the GNP now, your gross national product, here we are talking about the businesses of the citizens only. It might happen that a South African citizen, he or she is running his business outside the country. It is calculated under the national gross domestic product. And then we're going to get to have our first activity. So our first activity, it refers to the economic sector, since we're studying about the economic sectors today, which are 4. Then match the statement below with the primary. So they are reminding you what are those sectors: the primary, the secondary, the tertiary economic sectors. So you write only the sector next to the question number. So you are given question 1.4.1 to question 1.4.7. So in your answer book, you're going to start with 1.4.1. If you may read the questions together, it says the mining is an example of this economic sector. So hence I stress that you need to know the definitions, you need to know the examples of each and every sector. So second question, this sector is concerned with the provision of services. Our third question, it says the excretion of raw material from the earth surface. And then our fourth question, it concerns with the processing of raw material. And then our fifth question is the provision of electricity is an example of this sector. So you will remember there in question number 5 that electricity is a service. So you must be able to identify if it's a service, which sector does it belong to. And then question number 6, the manufacture of textiles, footwear, and clothing. The key there is the manufacture. Then question number 7, it contributes the least. When we're saying the least, it's the smallest to the GDP. So by now you do know what does GDP stands for, which is gross domestic product. And you must be able to know, to define what is GDP. So question number 7, it contributes the least to the GDP of South Africa. So I'm going to give you 7 minutes to answer this question. So like we normally say, don't forget to write your answers down so that you can be able to compare your answers when we are doing the correction. In that way, you will know which question you got it wrong and which question you got it right. So I will prefer that you do this individually so that you can see if you understood or not when we are doing the corrections. So after 7 minutes, we're going to do the correction. Right, girls and boys, I assume we are all done. So let us look at our corrections. The first question there, it's saying the mining is an example of this economic sector. So when we're talking about the mining, remember it is a primary sector. We said in the primary sector, there are 4 examples, which is the mining, the farming, the forestry, and fishing. So I always say 3 F's and M. Then you know M stands for mining. Then the 3 F's, it's the farming, the forestry, and the fishing. So now we're given an example of a mining. So therefore, the correct answer there is primary. So I hope we all got it correct. Then we're looking at the second question where it says the sector is concerned with the provision of services. So the key there is the provision of services. Remember, within the 4 sectors, we said the one that is dealing with or the one that is concerned with the provision of services, we said it's a tertiary sector. So even in the exam, you are allowed to underline the keywords so that you can be able to get the correct answer. Then the third question, it says the excretion of raw material from the earth surface. So again, the keyword there is the excretion. So excretion of what? Of the raw material. From where? From the earth surface. So you remember the sector that deals with the raw material, we said it's the primary sector. So here I will put P for primary sector. then I will put T for tertiary sector, and then I will put a P for primary sector. So the fourth question, it says it concerned with the processing. So the key there, it's the processing. What are we processing? A raw material. So from the four sectors, remember we said it starts from the primary, where they excrete or where they are taking out the raw material. Then they get to send it into the secondary sector, where the processing and manufacturing will take place. So therefore, the correct answer here at number 4 is the secondary. So I will put S for secondary sector. And then question number 5, the provision of electricity. I've already explained that electricity is a service. So therefore, anything that deals with the service, it belongs to the tertiary sector. So again, I'm going to put T. And then question number 6, it manufactures the textile, footwear, and the clothing. The keyword there is manufacture. We said secondary sector, they are dealing with manufacturing as well as processing. So again, I'm going to put S for a secondary. And then question number 7, it contributes the least. The key there is the least. Where is it contributing this least? To the GDP. So from the 4 sectors, the primary sector is the one that deals with the raw material, or it's the one that creates the raw material, which means because these material, they are still raw, they are not manufactured or they are not processed into a final product. Therefore, the prices, it will be less as compared to the final product, where now it is ready to be used. So as it is raw as it is, which means it still needs to be worked on. So hence the primary, it is contributing the least because they are dealing with the raw material as it is, then they get to send it to another sector. So I'm going to put P for the primary sector. So what does it mean? It means if the primary is the one that contributes the least, then you should ask yourself which sector is contributing the most. So the sector that is contributing the most is the tertiary sector. Why tertiary sector? Because it is dealing with the final product, or it is dealing with the service that is ready to be rendered into the consumer. And then we're moving right along. These are our answers there. Already said it's primary, it's a tertiary, then it's primary, your secondary. Then we can compare if we've got our answers correct. And then we said it's secondary and we said it's primary. So let us continue with our lesson. So now we need to find out the contribution of the sectors now in the South African economy. So each sector, what percentage does they contribute to the economy? So this is a graph, or this is a pie chart that was taken in 2019 up until 2020. Remember, we said the GDP, your gross domestic product, we're talking about the goods and services that are produced within a year. So hence it is 2019 up to 2020. So these are among the examples of each sector. How many percent does it contribute towards our GDP? So we're going to start with the agriculture. Agriculture, between 2019 to 2020, it contributed 1%. So why I wanted to put this contribution, so that you can be familiar in reading the pie chart or the graph or whatever, because these are the resources that they will use when they are asking the question. So agriculture, by now you do know it belongs to the primary sector. So remember, we said primary sector, they contribute the least. Hence, you see it 1%. Then we're going to the financial. Financial is a service. So hence, you see it is 20%. Then again, we're looking at the government. The government, it says 17%. Remember, it is a service. And then again, we're looking at the trade. The trade is a service, hence you see 17%. Then we're looking at the manufacturing. The manufacturing, remember, they are now taking this raw material and turning it into a product, which is manufacturing. Hence, it is 13%. Then we're looking at the transport as well as communication. Remember, this belongs to the tertiary with the 11%. Then again, we're looking at mining. Mining, remember, it's 8%. Why 8%? Because it is one of the examples of the raw material. We said the raw material, they contribute the least into the GDP. And then we're looking at the personal service with the 6%. And also we're looking at the construction. Also, the construction is part of the secondary sector. Why secondary sector? Because in the construction, they are still building something that will be a final product afterwards. Remember, they can build a house or any building, or they can be constructing a road. So it is falling under a secondary sector. So these are amongst the items that contribute towards our GDP. And then we're looking at now the contributions by provinces. So you do know we are in South Africa. We have 9 provinces. So therefore, each and every province, it has the role or it has the contribution that it is making towards the national GDP. So we are looking there, the largest that contributes towards our GDP, we are looking at GP, which is your Gauteng province. So why Gauteng province is the one that is contributing the most? It's because Gauteng, it has a lot of raw material, or it has a lot of minerals that are found in this province. So hence it is the largest. Then secondly, after your GP, which is your Gauteng province, we've got the KZN, which is KwaZulu-Natal, with the 16%. So again, you will remember why KZN is amongst the services or the second province to contribute to our GDP. It's because they have the ocean, which means they attract a lot of tourists or a lot of visitors. So hence they are contributing the second to the GDP. And then thirdly, we've got our WC, which is our the Western Cape. Also, they've got a lot of tourist attraction, which means each and every person will want to visit the Western Cape. Then followed by the EC, which is your Eastern Cape, as well as your MP, which is your Mpumalanga province. They both have 8%. Then followed by your Limpopo province with 7%. And then we're looking at the Northwest with 6%. And then after Northwest, we've got the Free State with 5%. And then after, it's finally our Northern Cape with 2%. So as long as it's contributing something. So if you were to be asked a question, which province does it contribute the most? What will be your answer? So looking at the graph there, or looking at the pie chart, you will be able to say Gauteng is the one that contributes the most. Then you get a question again, looking at the pie chart, which province contributes the least? So you will be able to say Northern Cape is the one that contributes the least. And then we're going to move into our second activity. So our second activity is still based on the sectors. We've got the diagram there, which represents the primary sector, as well as the secondary sector and the tertiary sector. So again, you are given the options in brackets. So in such questions, you need to write the correct answer. So if you may go through the question, the first one, it says the secondary or tertiary. So you choose between the secondary and tertiary sector. Refers to the provision of services. So again, now you must be able to underline what are the keywords so that you get the answers correct. Right? The second question, it says after X creation, the value is added to the raw material, is the secondary or the tertiary sector. So the key there is after. Then your third question, the economic growth in the primary sector declines due to the decrease in the agriculture or in the mining. Then the fourth question is the service sector that has shown the biggest growth in the mining as well as finance. So here you need to check the diagram so that you can see which one is the biggest and which one decline. So you've got 4 questions. Again, each question is 1 minute, and then after 1 minute or after 4 minutes, because it's 4 questions, then we'll be able to do the corrections. So I'm giving you that 4 minutes. So just read the statement, and then you write only the answers. So like for number 1, if you feel it's secondary, then write secondary. Then up until question number 4, and then after we're going to do the corrections. Right, I hope everyone is done looking at our answers. So we've got the first one. It says the secondary or the tertiary sector refers to the provision of services. So the key there was the provision of service. Remember, it is provided in the tertiary sector. Then the second one, the excretion, a value is added to a raw material, the secondary or the tertiary sector, because the key there was saying after, which means it is a secondary sector. Then the third question, we're looking at the economic growth in the primary sector declined due to the decrease in the agriculture or in the mining. You will see in the diagram there, it's declined in the agriculture with the arrow going down, meaning a decline. And then fourth question, the service sector that has shown the biggest growth is the mining or the finance. We're looking at the finance. Remember, all these answers, you're supposed to get them from the diagram. Then we're moving right along to our next questions. We have question number 5 and number 8. We have broken them down so that you can be able to look at them at the slide. So that the 5th question there, it's saying the mining has grown due to the increased production in the gold or the platinum. Again, you need to refer to the diagram. So I've broken them down so that you can be able to see them. Then question number 6, the growth is trade. The growth in trade is linked to a growth in the manufacturing or to the agriculture. And then question number 7, the sector in which the tourism makes a contribution is the secondary or the tertiary. So again, you need to know the tourism, which sector does it belongs to. Then last question, which is question number 8. The secondary or tertiary sector contributes the least to the South African economy. So again, read the statement and then you write down the answers from question number 5 to question number 8. So I'm going to give you another 4 minutes, and then after 4 minutes, we're going to do the corrections. Right, girls and boys, I hope we are all done. So let us look at our corrections. So the mining that has grown due to the increased production of the platinum. So if you can take a look there in the primary sector, you will see that the platinum, it has increased. Then number 7, the growth in trade is linked to a growth in the manufacturing or in the agriculture. So the growth there is the manufacturing. And then number 7, the sector in which the tourism makes a contribution is, you're supposed to know, the tourism, it belongs to a tertiary sector because it provides a service. Then question number 8, the secondary or the tertiary sector contributes the least to the South African economy. So now when we are comparing the secondary and the tertiary, the one that will contribute the least is the secondary. Remember, they are still dealing with the processing and the manufacturing. So the tertiary will have the one that is having a final product or the final good. Then I'm going to give you the homework. So in your homework, this is the first slide whereby you are given a figure, a 3.5 that is attached there, which shows the contribution of various economic sector to the gross domestic product, which is the GDP of South Africa. So there you are given in agriculture, a forestry, as well as fishing. So by now you're supposed to know this is a primary sector. With what percent? It's 4.7%. Then you are giving a mining as well as quarrying. It is also under the primary sector with 1.7%. And then again, you are given a manufacturing with 21.3% and the electricity, gas, as well as water with a 2.4%. Then you are given a construction with 2.4%. And then you are given a wholesale, the retail, the motor trade, and the accommodation with 12.7%. Remember, these are the ones that provide the service. And you are given a transport, a storage, as well as the communication with 11.6%. And then also you are given a finance, a real estate, the business services with 15.9%. And then you are given a personal service with 5.7%. And also the general government services with 11.7%. And the taxes less subsidies on products with 9.8%. So you need to start with the diagram first. And then after, we're going to the questions. Your first question there, you need to define what is gross domestic product. You are given 2 marks for each and every concept. And then secondly, what percentage does primary sector contribute to the GDP? So what you do here, you need to group all the items that are included in the diagram that belongs to the primary sector. And then third question, which economic sector contributes the biggest percentage to the GDP? So there, again, you need to add all the tertiary sectors items that contribute the biggest. And then question number 4, you describe the 2 factors that have promoted manufacturing in South Africa. And then the question number 5, you suggest the 2 ways in which manufacturing contributes to the economy of South Africa. So this is your homework. So we're going to discuss it in our next lesson before we start with that day lesson. So if we can summarize what we have learned today, we have learned about defining what is economic sector, and we have learned about the structures that build or that make our South African economy. And we have looked into the difference between the GDP as well as the GNP. So we have come to an end of our lesson today. Hopefully you have learned as much as you can, but most of all, I hope you have enjoyed the lesson. Thank you, and don't forget your homework. Till we see next time in our next lesson. Thank you and bye.